On Monday, February 27th, the Cosumnes Community Services District and the City of Elk Grove held the third of 4 presentations on how they want to spend the money generated by the voter-approved Measure E. That measure will impose a new sales tax effective April 1st, 2023 on most consumer purchases in the City of Elk Grove. The new tax levy will generate around $23 million annually for the City of Elk Grove and the CCSD. I'm Dan Garrity. On this edition of Elk Grove News Podcasts, we are providing an audio recording of that presentation. Among the speakers were Elk Grove City Manager Jason Behrmann, Cosumnes Community Services District General Manager Joshua Green, and Elk Grove's Housing Manager Sarah Bontrager. The presentation was held at Elk Grove's District 56 facility.
I am thrilled at tonight's turnout. My name is Crystal. I am the community engagement person here at the City of Elk Grove, and this just warms my heart. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and have a conversation with us about how to use Measure E funds to address homelessness. Just thrilled. Okay, so today we're going to go over a brief history of Measure E, some findings from the survey that we did last year, some top identified community needs, which is this is addressing homelessness is one of them, which is why we're doing this. We're going to talk a little bit about the Citizen Oversight Committee, what that means and what their role will be. But tonight, as you know, the focus really is on addressing homelessness. Okay, just to explain the purpose of the meeting, I just want to say the elephant in the room is that this is a topic that is very emotional. I imagine a lot of you feel very strongly about different aspects of this issue. And so I just want everyone to take a deep breath. We're here together, we're having a conversation. I really would appreciate everyone to be courteous and respectful. You know, it's a public meeting, you know, we're all humans, we're all doing our best. Speak from your own experience. There could be people in this room who have experienced homelessness. There could be people in this room who have felt economic harm from homelessness. Speak from your own experience, don't speak for others. Just live your true self, be you in this moment. Take space and make space. So I'm the kind of person in meetings where I like to talk. So since I'm a talker, my thing to remember in this workshop would be to make space for other voices. Conversely, if you're the kind of person that's really quiet and you don't usually speak up, I'm going to challenge you tonight to please take some space. Use your voice. The whole point of this is to have a conversation about our ideas and your ideas and what we want to do, so please use your voice. And the last one is these ideas are going to be shared in a small group. So what you see around here are 3 major topics on how to address homelessness. There's different projects and strategies. Some of it is about preventing homelessness. Some of it is about shelter and temporary housing. And then some of it is around encampments, enforcement, outreach. So I'm going to ask you a favor, please. We're going to hear from the city manager and the head of the Community Services District next to do the overview. And then our amazing housing manager, Sarah Bontrager, who's back there, is going to do an educational presentation. But I'm going to ask you to hold your questions and comments because there's a lot of you. And we really want to hear from all of you, so the staff are really looking forward to having these one-on-one small group conversations. So please hold your comments till after Sarah's done. So I'm going to invite Jason and Josh up to do that background.
Thank you, Crystal. As she said, I'm Jason Behrmann, City Manager. Really pleased to be here. Great to turn out this evening. I'm here with my good friend, Josh Green, General Manager of the CSD. This has been a great partnership between the city and the CSD. Both of our agencies provide really essential services to our community. And so as we started this process of having polls with our community, discussions and groups, trying to figure out what our community wanted, what the future for our community was going to be. We had a natural partnership between the city and the CSD. So some of you have been here at some of our other 2 sessions that we've had where we talked about things like economic development and public safety. Today's focus on homelessness. Tomorrow we'll be focusing on parks and streets, and we'll get into a little bit about why those areas of emphasis and focuses came through these community surveys. We started this work a while ago. You can see on the timeline here on the screen back in February 21, which is where our council kind of gave us direction to have some community discussions, do some community polling, find out what those community priorities were and what we needed to do or wanted to do going forward. And so a lot of community discussions. You can see the number of times we went out to community groups. It's a couple different polls. It really came back with the desire to increase the levels of service and provide funding mechanism to do that. So that's how Measure E was born. City Council placed that on the ballot this summer, and the voters in Elk Grove voted to approve that sales tax, 1% sales tax measure by about a 54% approval rating. And that's where we are today. And so we're going to get into a little bit. I can go pretty quick. I'm going to have Josh talk a little bit about the polling we've done and kind of how we got to where we are here tonight.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let me first just express my appreciation for all of you taking time out of your day to be here with us. I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of faces of those doing great work in the community in this space. So thank you for coming and being a part of the conversation tonight. As Jason mentioned, I'm just going to talk briefly about the polling results. We did get out to nearly 30 community groups with this information, probably many of the groups that many of you are involved in. And we've done some work for the community in regards to an advisory group that worked with us as we evaluated the polling results, and a number of you are also in the room, so thank you for your time and dedication in that effort. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but what you see up here in a poll that was completed were community priorities, and as Jason mentioned, you see things up here that are both things that the city provides and things that the district provides. And at the top of the list there, you've got rapid 911, fire, police, medical emergency, disaster response, keeping public areas safe and clean, public spending disclosures, crime reduction, and then addressing homelessness there at 77%, which is the theme for tonight's meeting. Behind that, you've got maintaining streets, you've got parks, a little bit more streets, some youth programming, economic development, and then some additional items there around traffic, requiring audits, keeping funds local here to Elk Grove, and et cetera. So as we move through this work and thinking about how we set up these community meetings, we set up the 4 community meetings to represent kind of those interests that hold the best, and want to hear from you, our community partners and community members, on how we do that. As Jason flipped to this slide here, you'll see the public safety, roads and park safety, and quality of life. These were kind of reoccurring themes throughout the last 12 months as we were out talking to community groups and things that we heard from the community, which also then correlated directly back to that polling results that we had seen.
Just a little more history here. One of the important parts of this measure was the creation of a Citizens Oversight Committee, which we're in the process of advertising for. If you haven't yet expressed your interest, the nomination period ends March 1st, so there's still an opportunity to get your application into the city. We're looking for 5 individuals to serve as an oversight committee. I'll get into that in a second. The collection of the taxes is set to begin in April, in just a couple months, and then the city will start to receive those revenues at the end of June and into July. So again, like I said, the application period is open until Wednesday, and minimum qualifications are up there on the screen, and we're hoping to get a good pool of candidates from which the city council can select 5 to serve on that committee. Here's some of the objectives: reviewing the revenues and expenditure from that tax, completed an independent financial audit, reviewing the initial proposed budget to make sure that's consistent with what those priorities that the council and the community said were there. And again, these appointments are made by the mayor with concurrence of the city council and consultation with the CSD board president. So that's an oversight, kind of a little bit of the background. Now we're going to get into homelessness itself. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sarah Bontrager, our Housing and Community Services Manager, up to the front. She's going to walk through some of the things that we're currently doing, some of the challenges ahead. Sarah.
Thank you. I am so excited to see everyone out tonight to talk about this issue. I want to start off with just a little bit of background. I know many of you have had some involvement with homelessness in the past. past, but for some of you, this might be a new topic. So when we talk about homelessness, there are so many different definitions. Every federal agency seems to have a different definition of what homelessness is. But in general, the broadest definition is people who do not have a regular, adequate place to stay at night. And that might include people staying temporarily with friends or family, what we commonly call couch surfing, or people who are staying in motels because they don't have an apartment or a house, or people who are living in a place not meant for habitation. So people who are actually living outdoors or in vehicles. And those folks who are living outdoors or in vehicles, we typically refer to as literally homeless. A lot of the city's programming at present focuses on those who are literally homeless, people who are living in tents or their cars. But tonight we want to talk a little bit more broadly about homelessness and include those folks who might be unstably housed or might be living with friends or family. So in Elk Grove, what homelessness looks like, we have about 300 to 400 people who experience homelessness each year. And that would be people that we know are homeless because they are actually staying outside, or they're in a vehicle, or they're contacting one of our social services agencies and saying that they are homeless. Now, many of those folks will find housing in the course of a year. So about 100 to 150 people are homeless at any time. And that is a mix of adults and families with children. We actually recently have been seeing, unfortunately, more families with children experiencing homelessness in our community. So as I mentioned, people tend to stay outdoors. Mostly single adults are staying outdoors. We really don't see many families that are sleeping in tents. We tend to see more of our families in vehicles, in cars, or occasionally in RVs. And when we talk to folks, the reasons that they stay in Elk Grove, they tell us, are that they have some kind of connection to our community. They lived here before, they have a family member or a friend here. You know, they might be able to go have dinner with their family member and take a shower there, but they aren't able to sleep there. Or something like that. We see sometimes, especially for families with children, they have a grandparent or a relative who will take the kids in but won't let the parents stay in the house with the kids. And a lot of times schools are a driving factor too for families. At a time when life is really unstable, they're trying to keep their kids in school where they have that sense of stability. And the other factor that we hear is safety. People feel safe here in a way that they don't in downtown Sacramento, say. So the factors that drive homelessness are many. Every person has their own unique story to tell about why they became homeless. But what we are seeing, trends we are seeing, is that housing opportunities are really becoming increasingly scarce. So we're seeing really low vacancy rates, under 2%. A 5% vacancy rate is a normal vacancy rate. That means you can probably find an apartment when you need one. 2% is very low. We are seeing people do lots of applications before they find an apartment, and there's a lot of competition. Sometimes, 10 people will show up to an apartment showing. We are also seeing, and especially about a year ago, we saw a lot of smaller landlords exiting the rental market. So they were selling their properties. They looked at the market and how high prices had gotten, and they thought, I'm never going to get more money for my house than I'm going to get right now. And so they sold. And the tenants that they've had, sometimes for 10 years, probably weren't paying market rate rents, were forced out at a time when there weren't any other housing options, and they were really expensive because we saw rents go up over 30% since pre-pandemic. And so unfortunately, when your landlord sells your house and the rents are really expensive and there's not a lot of units, a lot of people aren't able to find something that they can move into. And so we are seeing that be a challenge. And really the key is we just don't have enough housing, but we especially don't have enough affordable housing. And at the core, that is what causes homelessness. So folks who are experiencing homelessness face a number of challenges, one of which is just lack of resources. We do not have any emergency shelters in Elk Grove currently. So once people become homeless, they do not have a place to go that night that's here locally. We also have, substance abuse and mental health treatment that is not terribly available. Sometimes when we encounter folks who want to get treatment, we cannot find them a place to get that for weeks or months, by which point they aren't willing to go anymore. We also have a countywide system that does not have enough resources for everyone, and so the resources are targeted to those folks who are the most vulnerable. And not all of our folks are the most vulnerable. And so, they don't rank highly enough to receive services through the county, or particularly housing through the county. We do have some transitional housing here in the city, which is housing that's meant for a shortish stay, generally 3 to 12 months. But there's not enough for everyone who needs it. And the way that it's set up, which is usually a shared housing situation, is not the right fit for everyone. Some folks are not able to do well in that shared housing situation. Folks also face a lot of stigma. They feel ashamed of being homeless. They may have lost some of their connections to their community, to their family and friends as they've become unhoused and exhausted resources with those family and friends, and feel like the community doesn't care about them. And that can lead to a lack of trust. And we see that actually quite a lot, is that even when we have resources to offer, people are skeptical about taking them. They might refuse them because they don't believe that it will work for them, or that they will actually materialize. Another very common challenge that we see is that folks have a disability. And in California, Social Security disability income is $1,100 a month. That is not enough to afford an apartment. Even at most of our affordable housing complexes, that is not enough. With families, we see a lot of them don't want to connect with some of the resources that we have to offer because they're afraid that if they do, CPS will come and take their children away, which is not actually the case. CPS does not do that just because you are homeless, but that fear is there. And then we just don't have enough affordable housing. We have huge demand for affordable housing. The housing project that we have, the affordable housing project, Gardens at Go 2, that will be opening here shortly, had a lottery and received 5,600 entries for 108 units at that complex. The folks have less than a 1 in 50 chance of getting selected to apply to live at that project. We also do not have any permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is a concept that's needed by folks who have been homeless for a long time, who have a disability perhaps, who have very low income. And what permanent supportive housing does is it takes folks and puts them into housing, but also gives them a lot of case management, wraparound case management, we call it, and folks that are there to help them be successful, to help them resolve some of the other issues that they're facing while they're housed, while they can be sure that their belongings are safe, when they seek, say, mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment or just life skills or job training. So we are the only community in Sacramento County that does not have any permanent supportive housing resources. And in general, there are not many options for people who don't have perfect circumstances, which is true for a lot of low-income people. If you have an eviction, if you have bad credit, there are so many people vying for units, and landlords are not looking to take a risk on folks who have negative circumstances. And so it can be really hard once you have an eviction, say, to get back into housing. And then on the city side, as we work to address homelessness, we face challenges too. There are some limitations that the city has on how we can move people off of public property when we can trespass them. There is a case law, Martin versus Boise, that says that if you want to move someone off of public property who's camping there, you need to offer them a shelter bed. There are not enough shelter beds in our community. We don't usually have one available, and so that really limits the city's ability to move people off of public property. We also have a lot of community concern around some of the solutions to homelessness. Citing shelters and permanent supportive housing in particular, it's really difficult. A lot of neighborhood opposition comes out when a project is proposed. As some of you may remember, if you follow the Elk Grove project, and even beyond that, projects have a lot of funding needs. It's very expensive to run a project that has so many social services, a lot of operations expenses, and cobbling together many different funding sources. So it is hard to put together those projects, and then it's hard to find the right location for them. So I'm going to move now to talking a little bit about what the city is currently doing, and then I'll move into some ideas we have for strategies for the future. But currently, we have navigation services, and so we work with a nonprofit called Sacramento Self-Help Housing to provide a homeless navigator. You can see her in the photo here with her Christmas meal that she put on for the folks experiencing homelessness. The navigator's focus is really on building relationships and helping people to get the documentation that they need to become housed. So she can take people to go get ID cards, to get birth certificates or social security cards. She can help people to get financial benefits like CalFresh, or take them to their appointments at Social Security so they can qualify for some disability income. And she can take them to get mobile phones because it's really hard to follow up on any sort of housing needs or social services needs if you don't have a phone these days. So she also does assessments to determine what people need in terms of housing, and she'll put people on lists for permanent supportive housing if they might qualify, and she makes referrals to shelter and transitional housing when there's availability. And our navigator works really closely with some of our nonprofit partners and also with our police department's homeless outreach team. So the city has 2 full-time problem-oriented policing, that's the POP acronym, officers that are devoted to homelessness. And so they try to respond to the majority of homelessness calls. They are out there trying to build relationships with people, make sure that they get in connection with the navigator, and at times with the mobile crisis support team, which is a licensed mental health clinician that goes out with PD to respond when there's a mental health issue. PD also assists with camp cleanups, and they implement our trash cleanup incentive program where we give people small gift cards if they bag their own trash at their encampment site, which saves us quite a bit of money on Public Works having to do the cleanups. So if folks are able to qualify for transitional housing, we do have 3 homes in the city. We have one that focuses mainly on single adults with a stay of roughly 3 to 12 months. And then we have 2 houses that serve families with children under age 18. And those are 6 to 18 month stays. We also have some other transitional housing that is in our community by organizations such as My Sister's House and Waking the Village, that is city supported but targets either victims of domestic violence or transition age youth, so youth ages 18 to 26. When in transitional housing, the residents receive shelter and stability, of course, and case management through our nonprofit partner, and then mentoring from Elk Grove Heart, another nonprofit partner that the city has. So the goal is to help them to resolve the issues that cause them to become homeless and put them in a good shape to get access to housing in the future, which we are very fortunate to have some priorities at our existing affordable housing complex for households that are experiencing homelessness. And so we've managed to move many of our folks in transitional housing onto affordable housing that long-term is stable for them. And we have a really good track record with them staying housed once they've made that move. We also have some shared housing. Not everyone is going to get an apartment or even have enough income for that. So we do have some shared housing that's essentially a room rental situation with shared kitchens and shared bathrooms. That's in the range of $500 a month for folks. And we see that serving mostly single adults. This last year, we did a landlord incentive program to try and inspire landlords to rent to households that are homeless or households that are at risk of homelessness. And that's gone really well. We've had great landlord participation in that. And then we also try to offer access to permanent supportive housing through coordinated entry. And we've had a few people be able to access that, but that is not a solution for most of the folks that are experiencing homelessness in our community. So just a few other strategies. We are currently making motel vouchers available through Elk Grove Heart, with a focus on families and vulnerable adults, so folks who might be disabled or have a chronic health condition. The Elk Grove Food Bank has been a lovely partner of ours over the years. They do a special distribution of food for folks experiencing homelessness, recognizing that they don't have cooking facilities, and so more pre-prepared foods. They also do their clothes closet and provide clothing for folks that they can actually go in and choose themselves. And they provide assistance applying for CalFresh, which is the food stamps benefit. And then we have Christie Cares, which does meals 3 times a week at the Elk Grove United Methodist Church, and that coordinates with the office hours that our navigator holds. So the hope is that the food draws folks to the church, and then while they're there, they'll meet with our navigator and access resources. So now on to what we want you all to give us some feedback on tonight. And so I'm gonna lay out a few potential strategies in 3 sort of buckets. And we've got 3 stations here, one for each of these buckets, the first one of which is homelessness prevention. And we really want to hear your ideas. You know, what do you like about these ideas? Which ones do you not like? Are there things that you would do differently or comments that you would make for these? So I'm going to walk through these and give a little bit of additional information. And then we've got folks at each station who are able to talk to you about these a little bit more, to answer your questions, to help you, formulate thoughts to put up on our boards and give us some good feedback. And I am looking forward to all of your brilliant ideas. I cannot do this work alone. I have so many good people who I see, many of whom I see in this room, and looking forward to getting more involvement. So on the topic of homelessness prevention, that's our first station, which is over in the back corner there. We have ideas like eviction prevention. So the most cost-effective way to solve a homelessness problem is to stop people from becoming homeless in the first place. It is much more expensive to provide shelter and free housing assistance to folks than to just keep them in the housing that they have. So eviction prevention really focuses on helping people who are in danger of losing their housing pay the rent that they owe and or some of their utility costs so that they can stay in the housing that they have. A kind of similar idea is housing problem solving. This could include paying back rent, but it's more expansive. Oftentimes when people have to move, they don't have money for moving costs. A lot of landlords now are requesting effectively 3 months rent upfront, security deposit, first month's rent, and last month's rent. And if you're renting an apartment that's $1,800, that's almost $6,000 that you've got to pay upfront. And many low-income people just simply do not have that much money. So the housing problem solving covers or could cover moving costs like security deposits. It can also be used to cover housing application fees. Housing application fees, if you're renting an apartment, you're probably paying $50 per adult per application. You might have to put in 10 or more applications before you can find a place. And if you've got 2 adults in your house, 10 applications is gonna cost you $1,000. Not everyone has that money. And then it can also be really flexible and potentially cover unanticipated one-time costs. So what we hear from folks sometimes is that the reason that they've become homeless is that there's just like one thing, like their car broke down and then they couldn't go to work. And then they lost their job and then they couldn't pay their rent. And then they lost their house. And if we had just, if they'd had just a little bit of money, a little bit of flexibility to fix that car, they would have stayed housed. And so this is a flexible option. We also have life skills education and mentoring as an option here. Sometimes folks need some additional assistance, just kind of understanding how to budget, how to address unanticipated costs. We have an organization in Elk Grove, Uplift Elk Grove, that does a really nice job of surrounding people with some mentors to help them break the cycle of poverty. And going along with that is some job training and career development. So helping people to improve their employment prospects so that they are able to pay market rent, so they're able to have some savings for rainy day fund.
Also, I want to add there, they have to also make 3 times the rent.
2 times at a lot of places, but some are 3, yes, yeah. So many times, landlords are looking for people to make 2 to 3 times the monthly rent and income, and that can be a challenge for folks. So those are our homeless prevention ideas. Looking forward to yours as well. I'll move on to our second station, which is shelter and housing, which is going to be up here at the front tonight. And so this is really the range of shelter to housing options, starting with, at the very shortest term, like warming and cooling centers. So shelters that folks can come into. They can spend a night, they might need to leave during the day, they might operate for a short period of time when it's very cold or very rainy, they might operate for the winter season, say, but it's not a consistent option. A long-term emergency shelter would be more of a year-round operation. Emergency shelters can serve both families and single adults. We do have some of each in the county, but in general, they tend to serve more single adults. Motel vouchers are a strategy that we've historically used at the regional level more for families. So getting folks into motels, paying for that while they try to locate longer-term housing. We also have seen in the region some interest in safe ground camping or parking sites. In general, a safe ground camping or parking site is going to be a location that is sanctioned. It's okay for you to camp here or you to park here. Typically, there's some security provided at night. With the parking ones, folks typically leave during the day and then they can come in at night to park. It's safe, and there's usually bathrooms. Well, there's always bathrooms provided on site for folks, and security to make sure that it's operating safely. And then there's transitional housing, which we've talked a little bit about, kind of a medium-term stay, 3 to 12 months generally. That can be housing that is your own unit. It can be housing that's shared with other families or shared with other adults. There are a lot of models for that. And then there's connections to affordable housing. So helping people to make those connections and get to the next step and get into affordable housing that they can maintain long-term. That works best for folks who have some source of income. Our affordable housing complexes, at most of them, the rents are going to be somewhere between $700 and $1,300, depending on the bedroom size and the household's income level. So affordable housing is not an option for someone with no income or very little income. But for folks who have some income and stable housing, we try to connect them with affordable housing. And we also have the strategy shared housing or room rentals. That can work really well for folks who may have, say, disability income or a pretty low income, and who are able to live in a household with other folks. Permanent supportive housing is kind of the gold standard for dealing with folks who have been homeless for a long time and who have a disability. That's the type of housing where you get the wraparound case management. In general, that is the housing that folks you may see in the community along the trails, living in tents. Most of those folks need permanent supportive housing. They don't have much income, and permanent supportive housing, the rent is set at 30% of whatever income a household has. So if they have $150 a month in income that they get from collecting recycling, their rent would be $50. And so that works for people of all income levels. We also have up here the strategy of landlord incentives, so providing an incentive for landlords to work with folks who may be disadvantaged in some way. They have bad credit, they have an eviction, they are currently homeless, and just, you know, a cash bonus or some sort of a damage assistance pool or something to alleviate landlords' fears about renting to those tenants. And then one thing we've heard from landlords is that they would like to see some support for people exiting homelessness to maintain their housing. So sometimes people have trouble readjusting to living in housing. They may need some extra assistance there. Landlords like to have someone that they can call that can kind of provide that assistance, provide some case management for folks who need it. And then finally, the last strategy here is for those folks who have the option of living with family or friends, helping them to make that work. Whether that be providing a little bit of a subsidy to the family or friends that kind of pays a rent that makes it worthwhile for them to take in the family member, or providing transportation to get to a different area of the state or even of the country to reunite with family or friends. So that's kind of the range of the shelter to housing strategies. And then our third area here, which you'll see is the three posters over there, is our services outreach and encampment response. So this is kind of a broad category that includes our homeless navigation and outreach. So having a navigator who can go out and walk the trails, who can talk to people, help them to get IDs and phones. This is not a PD person. So then we also have our homeless outreach teams, which is our PD folks, which do some of the same work, but they are not taking folks to get IDs or some of that work. We definitely need in our community improved access to mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment for those folks who need it and are willing to take it. And connections to healthcare is really important too. A lot of folks are managing chronic health conditions and may not have received the treatment that they needed. And so in order to be well, they need to have a regular healthcare home. Continuing work with food, clothing, and hygiene supplies distribution, so making sure nobody goes hungry and they've got the clothing that they need that's appropriate for the weather. Doing some employment support and job training so that we can help folks to increase their income and hopefully develop a career. That's not an option for every person experiencing homelessness due to the rates of disability, but for a lot of people that is a good goal. And then finally, we have some things related to encampment. So some incentives to keep the encampment areas clean and actually conducting encampment cleanups, sending crews out to make sure that those areas stay clean. So those are the ideas that we've had, or kind of the broad buckets of those ideas, and you all may have many other excellent ideas, and I can't wait to hear what they are. I will be over at the shelter and housing area, and we've got other staff staffing the other areas, and really just look forward to hearing more of your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Isn't she great? Okay.